Government officials confirm 24 men were arrested on I-99 near Bellefonte last week.
Federal agents just stormed a quiet Pennsylvania town and dragged out 24 suspected MS-13 members in one of the most brutal gang takedowns of the year. That's right. Bellefonte, a place better known for college football than crime, turned out to be hiding a full-blown MS-13 safehouse. Phones, fake IDs, extortion cash, and men with homicide ties to El Salvador were pulled straight out of suburban streets. And if you think this was just another arrest, you are wrong. This raid reveals how America's most feared gang is changing its playbook and why no town, big or small, is safe anymore. The agents knew this raid had to be perfect. On the morning of the 19th of August 2025, in the quiet streets of Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, everything looked normal. Kids were getting ready for school, and neighbors were walking dogs. But behind one nondescript building, a joint ICE and FBI operation was about to take down a full-blown MS-13 safehouse. When it was over, 24 gang members were in custody. So how did it happen? The truth is, this raid took months of planning. Investigators had been quietly tracking movements, listening in on communications, and mapping the network that led them straight to Bellefonte. It was a precise operation. The FBI doesn't swoop into a sleepy town without knowing exactly what's waiting inside, and what they found here was enough to prove that MS-13's playbook has officially changed. Inside the safe house, agents uncovered fake IDs, burner phones, wads of cash, and records of extortion schemes targeting immigrant communities. Every single item connected Bellefonte back to the gang's leadership in El Salvador, and yes, the links were real. Investigators confirmed that calls and texts from this Pennsylvania house were going straight to imprisoned MS-13 bosses overseas. That's how bold this clique had become. They were running international operations from a so-called quiet town. Now let's talk about the arrests themselves. Among the 24 suspects were names that law enforcement had been hunting for years. They picked up Oscar Alexis Martinez Lopez, a Salvadoran national tied directly to homicide cases in El Salvador. He was the kind of figure MS-13 trusts to keep violence in motion. The agents found evidence on his phone that linked him to orders from abroad. Then they arrested Delfin Amaya Perez, a Honduran with a violent history stretching back more than a decade. Arrest records from 2011 showed his involvement in brutal assaults, and yet here he was, still working in the network, still spreading fear in the community. The fact that both of these men were hiding in Bellefonte says everything. They were not laying low in New York City or Los Angeles. They had chosen a place where no one would expect them until the FBI showed up at their door. The FBI later said that for every MS-13 member arrested, 3 to 5 associates are effectively disrupted. Do the math. 24 arrests mean up to 100 people linked to this network were destabilized in one morning. That's like a seismic hit against one of the most violent gangs in the world. But don't picture a loud Hollywood-style raid. This was not agents in helicopters smashing down doors. The operation was executed with quiet precision. Tactical teams carried out traffic stops to corner suspects before they even made it to the safe house. Vehicles were surrounded so no one could escape, while surveillance units closed in from multiple angles. It was controlled, methodical, and above all, designed to protect the public. Now, let's pause here. Why does Bellefonte matter? This town is not a major city, it is not a border hotspot, and it is definitely not a typical gang territory. But it is strategically placed along I-99, with easy connections to Philadelphia, New York, and even Boston. In other words, it is a perfect logistics hub. Small towns like this let MS-13 members blend in, move product, and stay off the radar of big city task forces. The good news is that the evidence seized here is worth more than the arrests themselves. Phones, laptops, IDs, and every single device the agents found there is a gateway into the wider MS-13 network. Agents know that what they took out of Bellefonte will spark follow-up raids in other states. That's how these operations ripple outward. A safe house bust in Pennsylvania today could mean a takedown in New Jersey or Maryland tomorrow. Another critical piece is ICE detainers. As soon as these 24 suspects were booked, ICE filed detainers that guarantee they cannot simply walk out if local courts delay or soften charges. Even if state trials drag on or bail is somehow set, ICE is waiting at the door. Deportation proceedings will follow. But let's not sugarcoat this. The men arrested here were dangerous. The safe house was a base of operations. Documents and cash seized confirmed that MS-13 was running extortion rackets in immigrant neighborhoods, using fear to control businesses and families. Some of the cash was traced to local stores that had been forced into protection payments. That is textbook MS-13 behavior. They instill terror in their own communities to fuel their empire. And don't forget, these weren't some foot soldiers. The leadership profiles of Lopez and Perez show that Bellefonte was a serious node in the MS-13 web. When investigators pieced together the communication lines, they saw Bellefonte reporting directly back to El Salvador. Think about what that means. In the middle of Pennsylvania, a Safehouse was serving as an extension of a foreign terrorist organization. Because let's remember, as of 2025, MS-13 is not just a gang in the eyes of the US government. It is officially designated a foreign terrorist organization. And this raid is exactly why. They are not carrying out just some scattered street violence. They are doing about transnational crime coordinated across borders. After the arrests, it is clear that no place is off limits to the FBI anymore. If MS-13 thinks they can hide in rural Pennsylvania, federal agents will prove them wrong. Bellefonte was proof. Small towns are not safe havens. So when you hear 24 arrests, don't just think of numbers. Think of what that really means. A terrorist-level gang network was disrupted, homicide suspects were dragged out of hiding, and an entire Safehouse was stripped of its secrecy. The Bellefonte raid may have stunned a quiet Pennsylvania town, but to understand why federal agents treated it like a national security threat, you need to know who they were really up against: MS-13. This is a transnational criminal organization with deep roots, global links, and a reputation so violent that in 2025, the US government officially labeled it a foreign terrorist organization. This means that this street gang now sits on the same list as ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and that's not exaggeration. The gang story starts back in 1980s Los Angeles, where waves of Salvadoran refugees fleeing civil war tried to survive on the streets. Out of that struggle came MS-13, short for Mara Salvatrucha. At first, the members wanted to survive and needed some identity, but survival turned into power. By the 1990s, US deportation policies sent many of its members back to Central America, and instead of dismantling the gang, it started to spread. Instead of just being confined to LA, MS-13 took root in El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, and then it looped back into the United States. Today, the FBI estimates that there are 10,000 members in more than 40 US states who operate in tight-knit cliques. And they don't just hang out. They kill, extort, rape, and control their communities. That's not our wording, that's their own motto. Mata, viola, controller. It's the sick mantra they live by, and it explains why their name alone sparks fear in immigrant neighborhoods. So what exactly makes MS-13 different from other gangs? For one, the level of violence. They have carried out violent machete attacks, beheadings, dismemberments, and executions not just on rivals, but sometimes on their own members for disobedience. They are notorious for leaving bodies in public places as a warning. They kill not for the sake of killing, but to spark fear. And the victims are often the very communities these members come from. Immigrant families who fled violence in Central America end up terrorized again in the United States. MS-13 members extort local businesses, force teenagers into their ranks, and target anyone who dares to resist. This means even a bakery or a landscaping business can become a target if they refuse to pay rent to the gang. Then there is the recruitment machine. Vulnerable youth, especially recent immigrants, get caught in the web. Some are lured with promises of protection, others are threatened until they have no choice. Once you are in, the gang doesn't let you out, and that's how neighborhoods across Long Island, Virginia, Maryland, and Texas became fertile ground for the group. The gang structure also makes it harder to stop. MS-13 is not run by one big boss at the top. It operates through cliques, which are smaller units that answer to leadership in El Salvador but still act with independence. That makes it harder for law enforcement to dismantle the whole organization. You take out one clique, another keeps going, and Bellefonte was one of those cliques, operating quietly until the FBI ripped the lid off. Now, let's circle back to 2025. The terrorist designation changed the game. For decades, MS-13 cases were prosecuted like ordinary crimes, but now prosecutors can use anti-terror laws, freeze assets, and hand down harsher penalties. And raids like Bellefonte prove why that step was necessary. When your so-called gang has international communications with jailed leaders in El Salvador and hides in towns no one expects, you become organized terror instead of just local crime. And don't think this is ancient history. Everyone remembers Long Island's mid-2010 bloodshed. Teenagers like Kayla Cuevas and Nisa Mickens were brutally murdered with machetes. Their death shocked the nation and proved how dangerous MS-13 had become. That wave of killings pushed federal agencies into action. It sparked earlier crackdowns like Operation Matador and Operation Raging Bull. Hundreds of arrests followed, but the gang always tried to regroup, sending in new recruits or shifting to quieter areas. Bellefonte is evidence of that strategy. So when 24 members were dragged out of a Pennsylvania safe house, the FBI took a slice out of an empire that had thrived on fear for 4 decades.
They've engaged in illegal activity including attempted murder, rape, all kinds of felonies, including human trafficking of women and young girls.
MS-13 has built itself into one of the most feared names in the Western Hemisphere, and raids like this are the only way to chip away at it. But this was not just happening in Bellefonte. While agents were preparing to hit that Pennsylvania safe house, another front had already erupted. On the 8th of August 2025, just 11 days before the Pennsylvania raid, federal agents carried out a coordinated strike that dismantled another violent clique, this time in Nassau County on Long Island. The FBI planned dawn raids and surrounded multiple homes at once. Suspects were dragged out of vehicles before they could even blink. By the time the sun came up, 3 MS-13 members were in custody, facing 14 counts of attempted murder and 49 counts of assault.
Promised in the beginning that we were going to go after the worst of the worst. You're looking at it on the screen. That is the worst of the worst, and we're not done.
Among them was Elias Wilfredo Serrano Bonilla, a 21-year-old Salvadoran who had already been arrested once in 2020 for first-degree assault. He didn't stop there. According to prosecutors, he went on to rack up 8 attempted murders and multiple robbery and conspiracy charges. That's the kind of repeat brutality that defines MS-13. Then there was Edras Daniel Velasquez Giron, only 19 years old, but already ordered deported in 2023. He ignored the order, embedded himself in MS-13's Long Island clique, and by 2025 was accused of 6 attempted murders. That tells you exactly how fast the gang transforms new recruits into violent enforcers. And finally, Jeffrey Vladimir Valadares Arcaga, another Honduran national. He was arrested weeks earlier, but tied to the same conspiracy. His role was that he was acting as a link between Long Island and the gang's leadership back in El Salvador. In other words, he was a local soldier with transnational connections. The evidence the agents found was weapons caches. They seized phones filled with messages to El Salvador, and also extortion notes directed at immigrant businesses in Hempstead and Freeport. The raid happened after an attempted murder in Kennedy Park, where MS-13 members chased a teenager they thought was a rival for miles before nearly stabbing him to death.
A spike in crime and an attack on a young boy mistaken as a gang member that triggered the operation that resulted in the arrest of 42 violent gang members.
Now, Nassau County was not an isolated case either. Investigators confirmed that this clique was connected to nodes in New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, Texas, and even a Mississippi prison. That's how far the web stretches. Bellefonte was not alone. Nassau was not alone. Together, they show MS-13's true strategy. They get out of the spotlight of big cities, build cliques in suburbs and rural towns, and keep spreading quietly until law enforcement strikes back. And yet, these operations don't happen without tension. Local leaders in Nassau praise the raids, bragging that their county is now the safest in America. But immigrant advocates warn that close cooperation with ICE erodes trust. They argued that when county jails hold detainees for ICE, immigrant communities become too afraid to report crimes. It's a debate with no easy answer, but in cases like this, the public safety risk tipped the scales in favor of enforcement. What made these operations possible was the multi-agency coordination. ICE's New York City field office, the FBI's National Gang Task Force, and the Nassau County Police Department all worked together. Each brought something unique. ICE had the immigration authority and power to remove suspects permanently. FBI provided surveillance, communications analysis, and the big picture national view, and local police delivered the street-level intelligence, knowing which parks, blocks, and neighborhoods MS-13 targeted. Together, they proved that MS-13 is no longer untouchable. And let's not forget what happens after the arrests.
Is ICE involved in these takedowns?
Yes, so ICE was not involved in our operation except to the extent that if there was somebody who was apprehended and that individual was going to be released because of the cashless bail laws, we notified ICE. ICE came and picked them up so that they would not continue to do harm to our community.
These suspects are not walking free. They are being held in Nassau County Correctional Center, where ICE has lodged detainers. That means once their criminal trials are done, no matter the outcome, they are headed into immigration custody for deportation. There is no loophole, no escape hatch. So where does that leave us? Bellefonte and Nassau prove that no community is too small, no suburb too quiet, and no town too hidden for MS-13 to set up shop. And the federal government is responding with equal force. They are carrying out targeted raids, intelligence-driven operations, and have a strategy that goes straight for the worst of the worst. This isn't over. Every seized phone, every intercepted text, and every fake ID pulled from these raids is now in the hands of investigators. And you can bet those leads are already pointing to the next click, the next Safehouse, and the next early morning raid. Because if MS-13 wants to spread quietly into America's suburbs, now they know that the FBI and ICE will be right there waiting. Now tell us, what do you think? Will these arrests finally cripple MS-13? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you want to stay updated on the matter, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Goodbye.